With car manufacturers busy fighting strict fuel economy standards and while also caring a little too much about paper specs like 0 to 60 times, cars that are carefully crafted for the driver have become extremely rare these days, and cars like the Integra Type S just don't look all that good on paper at first glance. This thing cost over $50,000, it's got 320 horsepower, which is not all that much for the money and only 5 more than the Civic Type R. It also takes over 5 seconds to get to 60 miles an hour, and it's front-wheel drive, which, by the way, isn't actually a flaw and is actually what makes this package possible. The idea of putting 320 horsepower in a car and sending all of that power to the front wheels is ridiculous, especially for a sports car, but apparently not if you've perfected it, which Honda has, and it comes with quite a few advantages. For example, a front-engine, front-wheel drive car is simpler, so it's lighter, and there's also less drivetrain losses compared to a front-engine, rear-wheel drive car or an all-wheel drive setup, which means you have more power going to the wheels, and with the aggressive gearing of this car's manual transmission, it feels a lot more powerful than 320 horsepower. The chassis design for this car is also very impressive. It is extremely rigid and it handles really well despite being a fairly large vehicle with an incredible amount of interior volume and practicality. This car is a full 17 inches longer than a Golf R, but it's actually 200 pounds lighter. In fact, this car's power-to-weight ratio is better than a M340i's, which has 386 horsepower, which again shows that this car really isn't all that impressive at first glance on paper, but when you really look at it, it's actually a truly impressive machine. And again, that's a ridiculous amount of power to send to the front wheels, and it's by no means perfect in every way. I mean, this thing truly does struggle to get the power down off the line, which is why it takes over 5 seconds to get to 60 miles an hour, and it's also why Honda has fitted this car with extremely wide tires. These are 265s going all around, which are wider than the front tires of a Porsche 911 turbos. But it also means this thing has a ridiculous amount of grip and it corners like it's on rails. And actually, when you get these tires warmed up, it feels like it has the perfect amount of power. It doesn't feel underpowered and it doesn't feel overpowered. So what is the Acura Integra Type S? Well, it shares parts with the Honda Civic Type R, and essentially it's just a different take on the Honda Civic Type R. It was developed by a completely different team with different goals, and it cost about $7,000 more, and for that money, you get a few extra goodies, with the most obvious being Acura's styling. Now, to do a little walk around of the Integra Type S's styling, I have to say I am a bigger fan of the shape of the Civic Type R, while I do actually like the Integra Type S's styling quite a bit more. I just like that the Civic Type R is a much more obvious hatchback, while this is more of kind of a liftback sedan shape. This thing is a full 6 inches longer than the Civic Type R, and for that, you're not getting any extra interior passenger volume or even cargo volume. In fact, you get less passenger headroom in the back and you actually get slightly less cargo volume. So despite being 6 inches longer, you're actually getting a little less practicality. And that mostly has to do with the fact that this car has much larger overhangs in the back and over in the front. Now, moving over to the front, surprisingly, Acura didn't make any sacrifices when it comes to performance. You have a very, very large diamond pentagon grille, which I think looks great because this car has a very large radiator, so that makes sense. Down below, you have an opening for the intercooler, and you also have these kind of large vents on the side, which at first glance look fake because there's kind of nothing there, but it is functional, although slightly dramatic. As you can see, there's a little bit of aero. It's just to kind of route air around the tires. It's quite a bit dramatic, but it is kind of cool. You also get Acura's chicane daytime running lights with the jewel eye LEDs, and I also love that you have Integra stamped onto the front bumper. The Integra Type S also has a bit of a bulging hood, which gives it a slightly more bulbous shape to it, but it is functional because you do have nice heat extractors on the top of the hood. Now, of course, you do get slightly restyled wheels. They look similar, but they are a little bit different. They're the same 19-inch wheels, same width and everything. You got the same Brembo brakes, but the fender flares on this car are quite a bit more aggressive. I do really like it, though, I have to say. The fender flares on the front are metal, but if we go over to the back, I have to say things do look a little more tacky. These are plastic add-ons, and this is just a completely weird plastic add-on, and it looks okay, but in certain areas like this corner right here, it is a little funky. But overall, it's not all that bad because it does match the angular style of the Integra. Now, just like the Civic Type R, there is no moonroof in the Acura Integra, and this, of course, is a performance-driven decision. The moonroof would kind of increase the center of gravity, it would add a lot of extra weight, and the roof here is actually also used to increase the car's rigidity. Also, moving on to the back, you have a third brake light that is integrated into that rear window. And the big change, of course, is the lack of a large wing. Instead, you have a more subtle spoiler. And actually, on the topic of the rear of the Acura Integra, I think this thing takes it all the way. This is a stunning looking car from the back. I love the LED light setup, which is a big upgrade over the Civic Type R, which still uses some incandescent elements. And overall, this is a great looking exterior. You also have a slightly larger exhaust setup and a much more aggressive rear diffuser. It is a great looking car from the back. Now, earlier I did say the Integra has a little less cargo volume, but it's really not all that much. It's like less than half of a cubic foot or something like that. This thing has a tremendous amount of cargo volume. The biggest difference is just that this has a higher floor, a higher load-in height, and it just seems a little bit deeper, but it's about the same. It's still incredibly practical, and when you fold down those rear seats, you have a ridiculous amount of space in this car. Now, unlike the Civic Type R, the Integra Type S kind of carries a more luxurious interior to the back seats. We have leather covered seats in the back and even some leather inserts on the armrest. However, we don't have any rear AC vents or charging ports, but like the Civic Type R, I have a ton of legroom, even though this seat is as far back as it can go. But unlike the Civic Type R, I don't really have all that much headroom. If I'm sat back like this, my head is totally just touching the ceiling right now. I really don't have any headroom, and even if I crouch back like this, when I put my head back, my head is touching the ceiling. So if I'm sitting back here, I kind of have to have my body crouched forward like this, which isn't a deal breaker. This is still a really practical car for what it is. But again, compared to the Civic Type R, a little more luxurious, but a little less practical. But also, like the Civic Type R, you only got 2 seats back here because this is, of course, a 4-seater, and that has to do with the fact that this car only has like a 680-pound payload capacity, probably something to do with the suspension or the wheels or the tires, and that's only 170 pounds per passenger, which includes cargo, so putting 5 seats back here really wouldn't work. And that's why there's a cup holder here in the middle of the seat. It's to deter having a third passenger back here. There's no seatbelt, and you can't make it seem like it can seat 3 people, which is actually a problem with the Volkswagen ID Buzz. I think there's kind of space for 3 seats in the 3rd row, but there's only 2 seat belts. So I think it's actually being recalled for that. So this car only seats 2 people, and they have to kind of make it seem like it can only seat 2 people. Up front, you don't get the bucket seats that were in the Civic Type R. Instead, you get these kind of leather and Alcantara seats, which are very comfortable. They have a decent amount of bolstering in them. They are also heated. The driver's seat is also 12-way power adjustable, and you do get other color options. You can get this in white, black, or red, which is kind of nice. You do also get a few extra things. You get a sunglasses holder, you get a heads-up display, and a really, really nice 16-speaker ELS sound system, which sounds phenomenal. It's one of the best sound systems in a car I've ever heard. I really appreciate it. It's a big upgrade over the Bose system in the Type R. Now, when it comes to the infotainment system, it's a carryover, it's the same exact thing, and the instrument cluster is also the same. Now, one disappointment is the quality of the materials for this being a $50,000 plus Acura vehicle. If I compare this to the $30,000 Mazda 3 hatchback that I had a couple of weeks ago, this is quite a bit of a downgrade. I mean, I love the layout of everything. I actually am okay with the styling. It's just the quality of the materials is just a bit lacking, and a $30,000 Mazda 3 shouldn't have a much nicer interior than this. And being based on a performance vehicle like the Civic Type R, I understand that this isn't going to be all that luxurious when it comes to interior quality, but it could be a little bit better than a $30,000 Mazda 3. And there also could be a few extra additions, like having a heated steering wheel, which is an option on this $50,000 plus Acura. I wanted to add this section because I just couldn't stress it enough when I had the car, and it's that I used to be one of those people who wished that Honda would make these cars all-wheel drive, and I thought that the front-wheel drive aspect of these cars was this big flaw that Honda was just stubborn about keeping. I thought that it was them wanting to make a front-wheel drive car as fast as possible and to set records, but clearly it's so much more than that. Yes, it really is slow off the line, but honestly, how often are you launching your car? If 0 to 60 times are really what you care about, then absolutely this car isn't the one for you. I just haven't driven anything that corners like these cars, and that includes having briefly driven the Acura NSX. Speaking of which, the Civic Type R is only 3 seconds slower than the NSX around the Nürburgring, which is less than 1% slower, and that's despite having 250 less horsepower, which truly indicates that the Type R is traveling faster through the corners. The insane grip that these cars have through the corners is really where this platform shines, and it's really made me understand why Honda has decided to just keep the weight down and focus on perfecting this front-wheel drive car as opposed to kind of taking the easy route and making it all-wheel drive. Sadly, there is no paper spec, or at least one people care about when it comes to how good a car is when it drives around a corner, which does make it a tough sell in a world where people care a lot about 0 to 60 times. Now, the Type S isn't a Type R, but it does give you that experience plus some small luxuries. I mean, when you walk up to the car, for example, the approach lighting turns on, and it is kind of just a subtle reminder that you're not driving a Civic. The suspension is a lot more comfortable and a lot more tolerable, and to give you an idea, comfort mode in the Type R is equal to sport mode in the Type S, with comfort mode in the Type S being an extra layer that's just a lot more comfortable. Plus, it does also maintain the sound deadening that was removed in the Type R, so it's just a quieter vehicle overall. In fact, my immediate impression of the Type S was that I thought it was too toned down and too quiet, but once you engage sport mode, the exhaust opens up and it's much louder, and those pops and bangs do add a layer of excitement that is just very nice. So that's the Acura Integra Type S, one of just a few remaining driver's cars that you can buy today, and it is absolutely wonderful. I love driving this thing. It handles well, it's got the perfect amount of power, it truly is a great machine. Now, would I get this car over the Civic Type R? And really, it just comes down to price. With the Civic Type R, it still seems difficult to get one of those at MSRP, and dealers are still charging markups on that, and I personally would never buy a Civic Type R, especially at the prices they are today, above MSRP. And with the Acura Integra, again, being not all that great on paper and being a kind of $54,000 front-wheel drive sports car, it is actually more attainable to get one of these at MSRP. So if the price gap between these cars was, say, $4,000, $3,000, I would totally go for the Acura Integra Type S. But again, it still is a very expensive car. And also we have things like tariffs, so I have no idea what's gonna happen in the coming months. The Acura Integra Type S is built in the US, while the Civic Type R is built in Japan, which is currently subject to some pretty nasty tariffs. So in the coming months, we might actually see the Acura Integra Type S be cheaper than the Type R. I have no idea. But one thing for sure is I do think the Integra Type S is quite a bit more rare on the roads, and maybe that could help its resale value down the line 10, 15 years from now. But that's just speculation. There's truly no way to say for sure. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Acura for loaning me the Integra Type S, and I'll see you on the next one.